The soft hum of evening settled over Alderby Lane, where every hedge was trimmed to perfection, and every curtain closed just right. From the outside, their home looked like something out of a magazine. White brick, blue shutters, a garden that smelled faintly of jasmine. Inside, Laura Whitmore stirred a pot of soup she knew Daniel wouldn't come home in time to eat. He'd texted an hour ago, claiming another late night at the firm. She wanted to believe him, the way she always had. For years, Daniel had been the man everyone described as devoted, meticulous, loyal. The kind of husband who remembered anniversaries and always kept fresh tulips on the kitchen table. But lately, the small things had begun to rot around the edges. The phone that used to sit on the counter now never left his pocket. His laughter had grown forced, his touch mechanical. Laura had caught him staring into nothing some nights, his mind clearly elsewhere. When she asked, he said it was work. When she pressed, he smiled and changed the subject. She tried to silence the gnawing voice inside her, the one that whispered questions at night when the house was quiet. Maybe she was being paranoid. Maybe this was what marriage looked like after 7 years. A soft decay hidden beneath politeness and routines. Yet every time Daniel kissed her goodbye, something in his eyes felt wrong. Like an actor reciting a line he didn't believe. By the time he walked out the door that evening, briefcase in hand, the sun had dipped low enough to paint their street in amber light. Laura watched from the window as his car disappeared down the road. Her reflection stared back at her, smiling faintly but with eyes full of doubt. She told herself she'd let it go, that she'd trust him, but the silence that filled the house pressed against her like a weight, thick and suffocating. The clock ticked louder than usual. Every second stretched into a question. Finally, she reached for her coat, keys clinking in her trembling hand. The lie might have been small, but lies rarely stayed that way. That night, Laura decided to follow him. The evening mist had thickened into a pale veil by the time Laura's tires rolled off the driveway. Daniel's taillights glowed like twin embers ahead of her, cutting through the fog as he headed away from town. She stayed 3 cars behind, the rhythmic thud of her heartbeat syncing with the wipers dragging across the glass. The street lamps faded one by one until the road turned black. He was supposed to be driving toward the city center where his firm's offices stood, but instead he veered west, toward the rural edges of Surrey, where the fields turned into forests. Laura's mind clawed for reasons that made sense. Maybe he had a client meeting. Maybe he was helping a friend. Every theory crumbled beneath the sound of her own doubts. A cold sweat trickled down her neck as she pressed the accelerator just enough to keep him in sight. The road narrowed, hedgerows swallowing what little light the moon offered. The familiar hum of civilization was gone, replaced by the lonely rasp of gravel under tires. At one turn, Daniel slowed to a crawl before taking a hidden dirt lane, almost invisible in the fog. Laura hesitated at the entrance, headlights dimmed, her breath shallow. The lane wound deeper into woodland, branches arching overhead like ribs closing around a heart. She followed, each bump in the road jolting her with dread. A flicker of light appeared ahead, not the harsh glow of a street lamp, but a warm, flickering pulse, as if from a fire. Daniel's car rolled to a stop near an old cabin. The structure looked forgotten, its windows boarded except for one where a faint orange glow leaked through. Laura killed her engine, heart slamming against her ribs. She sat in silence, fingers gripping the wheel so tightly her knuckles blanched. Daniel stepped out of the car, his figure swallowed by the mist. The air seemed to shift when the cabin door opened. A woman stood there, slender and tense, the firelight outlining her in silhouette. Laura's breath caught in her throat. Daniel approached the woman, speaking quietly, gestures sharp and desperate. The woman looked frightened rather than affectionate, her arms folded across her chest like a shield. Laura leaned forward, pulse roaring in her ears, trying to hear their words through the night. Her mind refused to form any explanation that fit. Her husband was standing in the woods with a stranger, at an abandoned cabin, and the woman looked as though she wanted to run. When Daniel reached for her arm, the woman flinched. That single movement sliced through Laura like ice. She pressed a hand over her mouth, terrified of making a sound. The forest pressed close around her car, every sound amplified by tension. Laura kept her headlights off, trusting the dim moonlight to reveal enough of the cabin ahead. Her breath fogged the glass as she leaned forward, eyes fixed on Daniel's shadowy figure. He stood by the cabin door, speaking to someone hidden within. Then a faint creak split the air. The door opened, spilling a wash of candlelight into the clearing. A young woman stepped out, no older than her late 20s, fair hair tied back, her movements small and wary. She looked over her shoulder before stepping closer to Daniel. Laura's stomach twisted. They stood close, but the air between them felt wrong. Daniel reached out as if to comfort her, but the woman recoiled, folding her arms tightly. He whispered something urgent, his tone sharp enough that Laura could almost feel the strain from where she sat. A sudden gust of wind swept through the clearing, carrying the smell of rain and damp soil. The woman's face caught the light for a second, and what Laura saw stole her breath. She wasn't smiling. Her expression was tight, fearful, her eyes darting between Daniel and the woods as though she expected someone else to appear. Inside the cabin, Laura could see faint movement through the window. Shadows swayed against flickering candlelight. A wooden table, a chair knocked slightly off balance. The walls were lined with photographs, their frames crooked, faces turned toward the floor. Laura's mind spun with questions she couldn't silence. Who was this woman? Why was Daniel here with her in the middle of nowhere? Was this an affair or something far worse? Daniel moved closer, gripping the woman's wrist. She tried to pull away, but he held her firm. His mouth moved rapidly, and though the words were muffled by distance, his anger carried through the night. The woman nodded reluctantly, tears streaking her face. Laura's pulse quickened. She reached into her bag, fumbling for her phone. The tremor in her fingers made the screen blur as she unlocked it. She angled the camera toward the cabin, her breath shallow, the silence unbearable. Then the woman turned her head. Her eyes locked directly on Laura's car. For one terrible second, they stared at each other through the darkness. The woman's lips parted as if to scream, but Daniel grabbed her arm again, forcing her inside. The door slammed shut, snuffing out the candlelight. Laura froze, every instinct screaming at her to drive away, yet her curiosity rooted her in place. By the time dawn crept over the horizon, Laura's car was back in the driveway. She had driven home in silence, every image from the night before replaying in her mind. The woman's frightened eyes, Daniel's hand gripping her arm, the slam of that door. Sleep never came. When the first light touched the curtains, she was still sitting at the edge of the bed, listening for the sound of Daniel's car. He arrived just after 7, whistling faintly as he came through the door. His shirt was crisp, his tie neat, his expression painfully ordinary. The smell of rain clung to him. Laura stepped into the hallway. "Where were you last night?" Daniel paused, keys dangling from his hand. "At the office. You know how things are at the end of the quarter." Her voice cracked as she answered. "I went there. No one had seen you." He smiled, that polished, patient smile she once loved. "Laura, you've got to stop letting your imagination run away with you. You've been under strain. Why don't you rest?" Something inside her snapped. "I saw you. I followed you, Daniel. You were with someone at that cabin." For a heartbeat, the mask slipped. His jaw tightened, eyes darkening before he turned away. "You're being ridiculous," he said flatly. "I don't know what you think you saw, but it wasn't me." He brushed past her, heading upstairs, leaving the faint scent of his aftershave in his wake. The sound of the shower started a moment later, as though washing away the accusation itself. Laura stood motionless, disbelief twisting into dread. By midday, she could no longer stand the silence. She drove back to the cabin, heart pounding with each mile. The dirt road was slick from morning rain, the forest heavy with mist. When she reached the clearing, the cabin stood open and empty. No car, no signs of life. Only the faint scent of extinguished candles and footprints half erased by mud. She searched the nearby path, calling out softly, but only the wind answered. The woman was gone. That night, Laura sat on the sofa, staring at the muted television. Daniel had fallen asleep upstairs. The house felt wrong, as if the walls were listening. When she finally turned up the volume, the headline cut through the air. "Breaking news, missing woman found dead near Riverside Woods." The reporter's voice was calm, detached, describing the discovery of a young woman in her late 20s. The camera showed a police cordon, flashing blue lights reflecting off wet pavement. Laura's breath stopped. The photograph that appeared on the screen showed the same woman she had seen at the cabin. The image of the woman's face burned behind Laura's eyelids long after the television went dark. The name under the headline read Evelyn Clark, 28, last seen leaving a pub in Guildford 2 nights ago. Daniel hadn't mentioned Guildford in years, yet the next morning he spoke as if nothing had happened. He made coffee, checked his watch, kissed her cheek. The normality of it scraped against her nerves like glass. She waited until he left for work before beginning her search. Every cupboard, every drawer, every forgotten corner of their house felt different now, as if something poisonous had seeped into the air. When she pulled a row of books aside on the study shelf, something small and black slid to the floor. Daniel's second phone. Her hands shook as she unlocked it. He had used the same passcode as his main one, a careless oversight or a silent dare. The screen opened to a thread of messages. Evelyn, we can't keep meeting like this. Daniel, you worry too much. Evelyn, you promised no one would find out. Laura's stomach clenched. Her pulse pounded in her ears as she scrolled further. The tone of the conversation shifted from anxious to frightened. Evelyn, please don't make me go back there. Daniel, you know what will happen if you talk. The words blurred as tears stung her eyes. She pressed a hand to her mouth to stop the sob rising in her throat. It wasn't the language of lovers. It was the language of control. Her mind raced through possibilities. Had he been blackmailing her? Was Evelyn threatening to expose him? Or had she discovered something she was never meant to see? The door creaked downstairs. Laura froze. Daniel's voice carried faintly up the hall. Laura, are you home? She slipped the phone into her pocket and hurried to the kitchen, forcing her breathing to steady. Daniel appeared in the doorway, still in his work clothes, his expression unreadable. You're back early, she managed. Forgot a file, he said, studying her face. You look pale. I didn't sleep well. His gaze lingered for a second too long before he nodded and turned away. The front door clicked shut a moment later. Laura stood there, the weight of the phone burning against her hip. She wanted to confront him, demand the truth, but the messages had already changed everything. The woman in the woods wasn't a stranger to him. She was a threat. When she finally opened the phone again, one final message stared back at her, time-stamped hours before the news broke. Evelyn, please, don't make me go back there. The next morning, Laura waited until Daniel's car disappeared down the street before pulling the hidden phone back out. She copied the number from Evelyn's messages and searched it online. Nothing came up, but the unease in her chest grew heavier. There had to be more. In the study, she turned on Daniel's desktop computer. The screen glowed in the dim light, casting long shadows across the floor. It was password protected, but she knew Daniel's habits. He always used numbers that meant something to him. Their wedding date didn't work. His birthday failed too. Then she tried their old house number from when they first met, and the desktop opened. Emails, bank statements, work documents. But the company letterhead was one she didn't recognize. The business name, Carrick and Vale Holdings, looked legitimate until she searched it. No address, no staff, no record of incorporation. It didn't exist. Her pulse quickened as she followed digital trails that led nowhere. Each search revealed inconsistencies. His employment dates changed between forms. Old addresses listed under different towns. Entire years missing from public records. She pulled open the drawer where he kept paperwork and found a folder labeled mortgage papers. Inside were photocopies of an ID card. But the name printed wasn't Daniel Whitmore. Read Daniel Kerrigan. Laura's breath caught. The date of birth was the same. The photo was unmistakable. He hadn't just lied about his work. He had changed his name. She turned to the computer again, hands trembling as she typed Daniel Kerrigan into the search bar. The first results were harmless. A few old directories, a forgotten electoral roll. But buried deeper in the results was a headline from a decade ago. Police continue search for missing woman, linked to local accountant. She clicked. The article loaded slowly, her pulse matching each second. A grainy photograph appeared of a smiling woman with auburn hair, standing outside a seaside cafe. The caption read, Charlotte Kerrigan, wife of missing accountant Daniel Kerrigan, vanished without trace from their Dorset home. Laura's mouth went dry. The accompanying article described how Daniel had vanished shortly after his wife's disappearance. He was questioned once, then disappeared himself. Authorities believed he had changed identity and relocated. The air in the study grew colder. She stared at the article, the truth unraveling faster than she could process. Every anniversary, every promise, every quiet night had been built on the ashes of someone else's life. A sound jolted her back, the unmistakable creak of the front door opening downstairs. She froze, eyes darting toward the staircase. The computer screen still glowed, the article visible in full. "Laura?" Daniel's voice called from the hallway, calm, unhurried. "I forgot my phone." Her hand slammed the laptop shut, heart thundering. Laura's pulse drummed against her ribs as Daniel's footsteps echoed down the hall. The study door stood half open, the glow of the computer screen leaking through the crack like a secret desperate to be seen. She forced herself to breathe evenly, hands trembling behind her back. He stepped into the doorway, smile faint and wrong. "You're up early. What are you doing in here?" Her throat felt dry as dust. "I could ask you the same." His eyes darted to the desk. The laptop sat closed, but the faint hum betrayed that it had only just gone to sleep. He took a step closer, the calmness in his tone stretched too thin. "You've been through my things." "I found your other name," she said, voice cracking under the weight of it. "Daniel Kerrigan." "Who is Charlotte? Who was Evelyn to you?" He blinked once, expression unreadable. Then came a quiet laugh that made her stomach twist. "You shouldn't have done that. I deserve the truth." He moved toward her, slow and deliberate. "The truth? You wouldn't understand it." Laura reached into her pocket and pressed record on her phone. "Try me." For a moment, silence filled the space between them. Then his expression shifted. No warmth, no charm, only something hollow and ancient in his stare. "Charlotte wasn't supposed to die." I tried to fix things after that, start again, build a life that meant something. But people like Evelyn keep finding me, dragging the past back from the grave. Her breath caught. "You killed them." He tilted his head. "They left me no choice." Laura stumbled backward, the desk catching the back of her legs. Her phone slipped slightly in her grip. "You need to leave." "I've called the police." Daniel's smile widened. "You think they'll believe you over me?" "You've been unwell, remember? I've told everyone you've been paranoid." The air tightened. She lunged for the door, but he grabbed her arm. The struggle sent a lamp crashing to the floor, glass shattering across the carpet. Pain lanced through her wrist as she tore free and bolted into the hallway. "Laura!" he shouted, voice suddenly raw. "Don't make this worse." A siren wailed faintly in the distance. Daniel froze, listening. His eyes flicked toward the front door, then back to her. "You were never supposed to find out," he whispered. He turned, disappearing into the night as the sound of sirens grew louder. When the police finally entered, they found the house in chaos, the shattered lamp, the streak of blood across its base, papers strewn across the floor. Laura stood trembling in the corner, unable to speak. An officer swept his torch across the wall. In thick, uneven handwriting, scrawled in what looked like red marker, were the words, "You should have just trusted me." Rain tapped against the window like restless fingers, steady and endless. Months had passed since that night, but the sound still made Laura flinch. Every creak of the floorboards, every shadow stretching across the walls pulled her back into the memory of Daniel's whisper. "You were never supposed to find out." The police never found him. His car was discovered abandoned near the old railway bridge, but no body, no footprints, nothing. The detective's words still echoed in her mind. He's either gone or he doesn't want to be found. Laura tried to rebuild her life in fragments. She moved into a smaller house on the outskirts of town, took a teaching job at a local college, and kept her blinds closed at night. The neighbors called her polite but distant, unaware that she barely slept, that she jumped at the sound of her own name. One evening, as dusk smothered the sky, she noticed an envelope on her doorstep. "No postage mark, no name." Her hands trembled as she carried it inside, slicing it open with a knife from the kitchen drawer. Inside was a single photograph. Her throat tightened. It was her, lying in bed, hair spread across the pillow, the faint glow of her bedside lamp in the corner of the frame. The photograph had been taken from inside her house. A shiver crept through her bones. She flipped the photo over and her breath caught. In Daniel's unmistakable handwriting were 3 words. "It's not over." The letters slipped from her hands. She ran to the front door, fumbling with the lock, scanning the rain-soaked street. Nothing. Only the soft hum of distant traffic and the reflection of her own terrified face in the window. Her phone lay on the counter, screen lighting up with a message from an unknown number. Just one word, smile. Laura dropped the phone, backing away. The air felt colder now, heavier, as though the walls themselves were holding their breath. In the following weeks, she reported everything. The photo, the message, the feeling that someone was watching. The police were sympathetic, but without evidence, they could do little. They offered her protection for a while, then moved on to newer cases. Every night, Laura checked the locks twice. She kept a knife beneath her pillow. Yet the unease never left, an invisible thread pulling tighter with each passing day. One morning, as dawn broke pale and uncertain, she looked out the window and saw footprints in the mud beneath her garden fence. Fresh ones, leading toward the trees. Her eyes stung with tears she couldn't hold back, because deep down, she knew he was still out there, watching, waiting. The truth had torn her world apart, and now it lived beside her, breathing, unseen, unending.